The first time I saw that yellow notice nailed to my barn door, my heart sank. In big, bold letters, it read, "Violation structure does not meet HOA code." I stood there, gripping the paper, the wood grain under my fingers trembling with the weight of 30 years of memories. That barn wasn't just a building. It was the place where I taught my son how to hammer his first nail, where my late wife, Linda, kept her jars of peach preserves, and where my grandkids loved to chase the barn cats on Sunday afternoons. And now, some HOA official had the audacity to call it illegal, I muttered under my breath. This barn was here long before your fancy rules. As I crumpled the notice, my neighbor Jerry came walking over. He was holding his morning coffee, that old denim cap pulled low over his forehead. "Frank," he said, glancing at the paper in my hand, "don't tell me they finally came after your barn." "They did," I replied bitterly. "Claim it doesn't meet code." Jerry sighed. "They're picking on you because you're not the type to bow down. They tried it with me over my garden shed, remember? But I paid the fine and let it go. You're tougher than I am." I looked at the barnet's red paint, faded but proud. My wife's handprint was still on one of the beams from when we raised it together. Letting it go wasn't an option. That evening, I walked into the HOA meeting, the paper still in my pocket. The room smelled of polished wood and coffee that had been reheated one too many times. The board president, Margaret, everyone in the neighborhood just called her Karen behind her back, looked at me over her glasses. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice sharp, "your barn is in violation of our community code. Structures of that size require board approval, which you did not seek." I kept my voice calm, though my chest burned. "That barn was built in 1992, Margaret. There was no HOA back then. You can't just rewrite history." She pursed her lips, tapping a pen on her clipboard. "Rules are rules. You'll need to take it down or face fines." A murmur filled the room. Some neighbors nodded along with her, but others looked uncomfortable. My barn had stood for decades, hurting no one. "Let me ask you something," I said, my voice tightening. "What do you think this barn represents to me? It's not just lumber and nails. It's memories, family, hard work. My wife's laughter is in those walls. You're asking me to tear down a piece of my life." For a brief moment, her face softened, but then the steel returned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker, but personal feelings cannot override community standards." I walked out. My fists clenched, but deep down, I knew I wasn't beaten. The next morning, I called the county inspector's office. A man named David Collins answered. His voice was steady, almost reassuring. "Mr. Walker, I'll come out tomorrow and take a look myself. Don't worry, we'll sort this out." When I hung up, I felt a small spark of hope. Later that evening, my granddaughter, Emily, sat with me on the porch swing. She was only 11, but wise beyond her years. "Grandpa," she said softly, "why do they hate the barn so much?" "I love playing in it." I hugged her close. "It's not that they hate the barn, sweetheart. Sometimes people get so caught up in rules and power that they forget about hearts and families. But don't worry, I'm not giving up." Her small hand slipped into mine. "I believe you," and as the crickets sang in the dark, I made myself a promise. I would fight, not just for the barn, but for the memory of everyone I loved who ever stepped inside it, because some battles aren't about winning. They're about not letting others erase the pieces of your soul. The morning the county inspector arrived, I was already waiting by the barn with a thermos of black coffee. The sun was just climbing over the hills, painting the faded red boards in a golden glow. A white county truck pulled up, and a tall man in his 50s stepped out, adjusting his clipboard. His handshake was firm but kind. "You must be Mr. Walker," he said. "I'm David Collins. Heard you've got yourself in a bit of a tangle with the HOA." I chuckled, though it came out bitter. That's one way of putting it. They want me to tear this place down like it's some rotten shack. But this barn stood solid for 30 years. David walked around the structure, running his hand over the beams, tapping gently here and there. Built well. Old-style craftsmanship. You don't see that much anymore. I felt a swell of pride. Raised it with my own 2 hands and a lot of help from neighbors. My wife picked the color. Said it had to be the brightest red in the county so it would shine in the snow. David nodded, making notes. After a while, he straightened up and looked me square in the eye. Mr. Walker, I'll be honest with you. From what I can see, this barn doesn't violate a single county code. Structurally sound, foundation solid, permits from back then are still on file. Legally, you're in the clear. Relief washed over me so suddenly, I nearly laughed. So all this talk from the HOA? He shook his head. They have rules, sure, but county law outranks HOA policy. They can't force you to take this barn down if it's legal. I grinned for the first time in days. You don't know how much this means. David smiled faintly. I can imagine. My father had a barn like this. We lost it when developers came through our old town. Never thought I'd see one still standing strong. I'll file the official report today. That evening, I felt like a man reborn. I sat at the dinner table with Jerry and a couple other neighbors who had stopped by when they saw the county truck earlier. So it's legal? Jerry asked, raising his eyebrows. Legal as the courthouse itself, I said proudly. Jerry slapped the table. Well, that's a slap in the face to Margaret and her little clipboard army. We all laughed, though beneath the laughter was tension. Because if I knew Margaret, she wasn't going to take this lying down. Sure enough, the very next day, I found another notice in my mailbox. This time, it wasn't about codes. It was about aesthetic disruption, according to the HOA. My barn was an eyesore that reduced property values. I stormed into the kitchen, waving the letter. Can you believe this nonsense? My daughter Sarah, who had come over with her kids, frowned. Dad, they just won't stop, will they? No, they won't, I said, pacing. They couldn't win with the law, so now they're making it personal. Eyesore, they say. That barn is more beautiful than any of their cookie-cutter houses. Sarah put a hand on my arm. Dad, I know you're angry, but don't let them get to you. Mom always said the barn was a symbol of love and work. That's what matters. Her words steadied me, but the fire inside me was growing at the next HOA meeting. I walked in with David Collins' official county report tucked under my arm. The room was full neighbors, whispering, the board sitting stiff at the front. Margaret cleared her throat as I entered. Mr. Walker, we've received complaints regarding your barn. Several residents feel it is unsightly and negatively impacts the neighborhood's appearance. Slammed the report down on the table so hard the pens rattled. This, I said firmly, is the county's official finding. My barn is 100% legal, structurally sound, properly permitted. You have no right to demand its removal. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Margaret's cheeks flushed red. Legal or not, she snapped. The HOA has standards, and we will not allow one man's stubbornness to drag down an entire community. I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. What drags down a community isn't an old barn. It's leaders who bully their neighbors and forget what it means to live like decent human beings. The room went quiet for the first time. I saw doubt flicker in Margaret's eyes, but she quickly masked it, tapping her pen again. We'll discuss this further and inform you of our decision. As I walked out, caught Jerry's whisper behind me. Looks like you struck a nerve, Frank. I didn't just strike a nerve. I lit a fuse. And deep down, I knew the real battle had only just begun. I wasn't surprised when the next letter arrived, but it still made my blood boil. This time, HOA was fining me $500 a week for failure to comply with neighborhood aesthetics. $500. Every week. For a barn that had stood for 3 decades without a single complaint until Margaret got it into her head to tear it down, I read the letter out, loud at the dinner table that night. Jerry was there, along with Sarah and the grandkids. Everyone fell silent as the words sank in. That's robbery, Jerry growled. They're just trying to squeeze you until you give in. Sarah's eyes filled with worry. Dad, what if they take you to court? Can they really do that? I folded the letter slowly, my hands trembling. They can try. But I won't let them steal this barn or the memories inside it. Little Emily piped up, her voice soft but certain. Grandpa, you always told me to stand tall when people try to push me down. Are you still standing tall? Her words hit me like a hammer. Out of the mouths of children comes the kind of truth adults forget. I smiled at her, though my eyes stung. I am, sweetheart. Taller than ever, the very next morning, Margaret herself showed up at my property. She stood at the edge of the driveway, clipboard in hand, her designer sunglasses gleaming like shields. "Mr. Walker," she called, her tone dripping with false politeness. "I see you received our notice." I stepped forward, meeting her gaze. "I did. And I see you're not satisfied with the county's decision," she sniffed. "The county may have its laws, but we have our community standards. Property values are at stake. And frankly, that barn is an embarrassment to this neighborhood." My jaw tightened. Embarrassment. That barn has more soul in it than all your polished houses combined. It's not just wood and nails, it's where my wife and I built our life. Her lips curved into a tight smile. Sentimental stories don't pay for lost value. If you don't comply, we'll escalate. Courts, liens, whatever it takes. I felt my chest rise with anger. "You go ahead, Margaret. But understand this, you're not just fighting me. You're fighting every memory, every laugh, every tear that barn has ever held. And that's a battle you'll never win." For the first time, she faltered. Her sunglasses couldn't hide the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But she turned on her heel and walked away without another word. By the end of the week, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Some folks avoided me, afraid of siding against the HOA. But others quietly began to show their support. Mrs. Henderson, from 2 doors down, brought me a basket of muffins. "Frank, I raised my kids in that barn with your Linda. We had our quilting bees there. Don't let them take it away." A younger neighbor, Mike, stopped me at the mailbox. "Man, that barn's a landmark. It's part of why I bought here. If they think tearing it down helps property values, they're crazy." Each word of encouragement strengthened my resolve. I wasn't alone anymore. But just when I thought I had momentum, the HOA delivered their cruelest blow yet. One evening, I came home to find bright orange tape wrapped around my barn like a crime scene. A large sign read, "Condemned, entry forbidden." My knees nearly buckled. No, they didn't. I rushed forward, tearing at the tape, when headlights flashed behind me. It was David Collins, the county inspector. He stepped out of his truck, his face grimmed. "Frank," I heard what they pulled. "I came as soon as I could." "David," I stammered, holding the sign, "they've marked it condemned." "But you said," he cut me off. "And I stand by my report. This barn is legal and safe. The HOA doesn't have the authority to condemn a structure. That's pure intimidation." My fists clenched around the sign until the wood splintered. Rage burned hotter than ever. But beneath it was something deeper: grief. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about rules or fines. It was about dignity. About whether one stubborn group could erase a man's life. David put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll fight this, Frank. But you've got to be ready. They're playing dirty." I looked at the barn, glowing in the moonlight beyond the ripped tape. My wife's laughter seemed to echo faintly from its walls. "I've never been more ready," I whispered. "Because if they wanted war, they'd just declared it." The next HOA meeting was unlike any I'd ever seen. Word had spread about the orange tape and condemned sign, and half the neighborhood turned up. Some came out of curiosity, others out of anger. But all of them filled the room until there wasn't an empty chair in sight. Margaret sat at the head of the table, her usual calm veneer cracking under the weight of so many watchful eyes. When I entered, holding the county report in one hand and the broken condemned sign in the other, the room fell silent. I placed the sign squarely on the table in front of her. "Explain this." Her voice wavered for the first time. "Mr. Walker, the board acted in the best interest of the community." "No," I cut her off. "This isn't about community. This is about control. You tried to condemn something you had no authority over. This," I lifted the county report high for all to see, "proves my barn is safe and legal. The only thing out of line here is this HOA board." Murmurs erupted. A man in the back shouted, "He's right. That barn's been there longer than this HOA." Mrs. Henderson stood up, her voice trembling but firm. I quilted in that barn with Linda. I watched my children play there. It's not an eyesore, it's a piece of our history. The crowd grew louder, voices rising in agreement. Even neighbors who'd been silent before began to speak up, sharing their own memories tied to that old barn. Margaret slammed her gavel, her face red. Order. This meeting is out of order. But no one listened. For once the community wasn't following her lead. David Collins, the county inspector, stepped forward. He held up his badge for everyone to see. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here in my official capacity. This barn is legally compliant, structurally sound, and fully permitted. The HOA has no authority to condemn it. Their actions are not just overreaching, they're unlawful. Gasps filled the room. Margaret's hand shook as she set the gavel down. I took a deep breath, letting the room quiet before I spoke again. Neighbors, this isn't just about a barn. This is about whether we let rules and power crush the things that make life worth living. My wife and I built that barn with love. It holds memories that can't be measured in property values. And if we let them tear it down, what's next? Our gardens, our porches, our very homes? A hush fell. I could see tears in some eyes, anger in others, but most of all, saw understanding. Then little Emily, my granddaughter, slipped out from her mother's side. She walked straight to the front of the room, her small voice carrying louder than anyone expected. My grandma painted that barn. She told me it would last longer than her, and it has. If you take it away, you're taking her away too. Please don't let them. The room broke. People clapped, some cried, and even those who'd never spoken against the HOA before nodded in agreement. Margaret knew she had lost. She stood stiffly, gathering her papers. "This meeting is adjourned," she muttered, and walked out under the weight of dozens of disapproving stares. For the first time, the board didn't follow her. They stayed behind, listening as neighbors formed a circle around me. Jerry slapped my back. "Frank, you did it. You showed them they can't bully us anymore." I looked around at the faces young, old, hopeful, and realized this fight had never just been about me. It was about all of us learning to stand tall together. That night, I sat on the porch swing with Emily beside me. The barn glowed in the soft moonlight, peaceful and unshaken. "Grandpa," she whispered, "saved it." I smiled, pulling her close. "No, sweetheart. We saved it, me, you, your mom, our neighbors. That's what community is supposed to mean." She leaned her head against my shoulder. Grandma would be proud. My throat tightened, but I nodded. Yes, she would. As the crickets sang, I realized something deeper than victory. Life isn't measured by rules or property values. It's measured by love, memories, and the courage to protect them. And that barn, standing tall in the night, would forever remind us all that some things are worth fighting for, not because they're perfect, but because they're ours.